This is Mark Lieberman, the host of the radio show The World According to Mark, brought to you by WPVM LP 103.7 FM in Asheville, North Carolina. And today we're going to talk to a creative person, a non-lawyer person, non-politician person, although she may have some political views that she'll express. So without further ado, I have Jaime Byrd with us on the air. Hi, Jaime.
Hi, Mark. Thanks for having me today.
So, sort of a chance meeting of Jaime Byrd. We were at the Grand Bohemian Gallery, which is not, it's not in Europe. It is in the United States. And we saw some amazing art, which we're going to talk about later. And then we learned who the artist was, none other than my guest, Jaime Byrd. And then I ran into her figuratively and literally again at the Magnetic Theater, where my wife and I were performing in a one-act play. And there she was again. And there was all of her art. So
I'm everywhere.
You were everywhere. So I realized it was important to get the real thing here on the radio and on Facebook and find out more about you. So you describe yourself in some of your bios as a self-educated filmmaker as well as an artist. You grew up in Los Angeles, so you say, surrounded by movie making, and you're an award-winning director, and you've also done commercials, music videos, and shorts. But again, as I said, I know you to the extent that I know you with respect to your art, but your art is unique. And I know that you've combined a lot of your experience with filmmaking into the art, which again, we'll talk about. So you were all over the world, you said, California.
I'm making it all up.
Or Oregon, Thailand, and Vietnam. Those are interesting places that not everybody goes to. How did you and when did you happen to come to Asheville, and why are you here as opposed to those really exotic places? Right.
That's a great question. I have been traveling around a lot. I I was one of those people living in growing up in Los Angeles where I did the escape from LA. Took me a long time, but I finally did. And my first stop was just to stay on the West Coast and go north. So I ended up in Northern California, then eventually Oregon, even spent a little stint in living in Kauai, Hawaii. Um, and after living in Oregon for 6 years, I just was ready for a change. And my sister-in-law had moved to Asheville and she mentioned it and said, "You guys should check it out. It's really great." And they accidentally found it as well. And so we drove all the way out here from Oregon, discovered it, and just said, "Yeah, this is it. We want to live here. This is so great." There was just so, and this was in 1999. So it was almost 22 years ago. And even then, it was just filled with a lot of creatives, a lot of energy that was going on here that, between music and the arts.
And beer. I
And
always have to
well,
add beer.
there wasn't a lot of beer then. There was really only two breweries at the time. And which was fine. We were happy with those. So, but yeah, the whole beer and tourism grew over the last 20 years. So it's quite a different place. We live outside of Asheville in a very rural area, so we don't experience much of the growth that's happened directly in our world, but every time we go to Asheville, of course. But it's changed a lot. It's I think it's good, and some of it is bad, and it's typical growing pains that's happening here. And but in at one point, my husband and I decided that we really wanted to do more international travel. So we had left our home and rented it to some people and started just being nomads for 5 years. after a lot of other travel we had done. But we spent 5 years just living in other places, and we spent 6 months in Bali. We spent, months at a time in each town or place that we went, and most of our time it seemed like we spent in Mexico. So, and I was doing a lot of film work then, working for other people, anyone that would hire me. But at the time, I was hired as a documentary editor, and I was just traveling with a laptop and a hard drive. And before people became more remote, it was, we were living and working remotely. So it was great. We were able to go live in all these places and work. So,
And
um,
you invented yourself with that long before COVID made it a necessity.
right, long before
Okay.
it became like part of our life now. So,
Right.
um, and I realized, well, we should do this now. We can. All I have to do is carry around this little bit of gear, and I'm able to do it. So, yeah, I've done a lot of film work at different levels, cinematography, mostly editing for other filmmakers. And I did a couple of uh, feature long length documentaries, and one with another Asheville filmmaker, Katie Damon, that lives in Asheville. She did a film on the toxicity of the Superfund sites here, and it ended up getting some Emmy nominations, including I got an Emmy nomination for editing, so that was kind of exciting. But she got it out there, and a lot of people saw the film, so that was very cool. And but eventually I realized I liked painting more than doing filmmaking work. Mostly because I could just do it on my own. I didn't have to work with a lot of other people. And so I've been painting for a long time off and on, but I didn't start immersing myself into it until a couple of years ago. And at that point, I was just having a lot of fun, which is what I'm still doing. I'm still enjoy just painting. But then there was this epiphany where I realized, because I had seen another artist do it, I certainly did not invent this, but when I'd seen other people using augmented reality in their work, I I was like, this is like a perfect merging of the two things that I love to do, which still allows me to play with film on my own without being hired by somebody and regulated. But it allows me to do that and paint and tell a deeper story into my paintings. So um, it was a pretty natural kind of merging of worlds. So that's my life story in a nutshell, kind of.
Oh, you left out all the juicy parts. But let
I
me
think we'll get back there.
let me just, before I leave the filmmaking, and I just want to note for the record, when you start talking about augmented reality, and then we still use the word filmmaking, and nobody's really using film anymore.
True.
There is a culture clash there for me.
It's
But
true.
you said that you were self-educated as a filmmaker, and that's interesting because you apparently had the credentials to get hired on to do some actual filmmaking stuff, including making documentaries and editing. So how did you go about learning this enough to
I
establish
I
yourself?
I think film school is a scam.
Ah, you were going to say joke, but I got the scam
No,
part.
it's not a joke. I think it's great. And I think film school is a great thing. The one thing it's amazing for is the camaraderie and the connections that you can make, and then collaboration you can do with other people. Doing it on your own, like I did, yeah, left me kind of not in a position where I had a lot of people to collaborate with, for sure. But I had grown up in LA. I had worked on film sets a lot as a young person, whether it was acting or helping out as a PA or something. But I was really familiar with, the process, as well as I've been a movie fan and complete movie freak actually for most of my life. So um, my dad would take me to the silent film theater as a kid, and we would watch old silent movies together. I mean, I took every kind of movie class you can think of. I thought at one point I wanted to be a movie historian so, because I just had too much trivia in my head about film. So I didn't think at the time I was just not capable of taking on when we were really using film. I had cut on a big machine splicer before, and I just said I'm not cut out for this. This is just not something that my patience could handle. So it wasn't until technology where we had digital cameras and then nonlinear editing for your laptop that changed everything for me. And that was, I'm much more computer oriented that way. So that was an easier way for me to transition into making films and then learning, which I think the best way to learn how to make movies is just to make them. So, and that's all I was doing. I just kept making short films, little films. I'd show that I do little documentaries on people that I found fascinating, and then just people saw what I was doing, and then it just kind of grew from there. So
They said hire her.
yeah.
Okay, so then talk to us briefly about the artist part, the painting part. Did you have formal training in that, or is that also was that also a scam?
It's a scam. My whole life is a scam, Mark. Uh, I'm a typical artist that feels like I'm just trying to get away with something all the time, you know. So and no, I absolutely don't take myself too seriously. I went to school. I went to college and studied fine art in LA. And but most of I feel like almost the whole time that I was there, I was studying music and pottery.
Say,
And I was just really involved in both of those at the time. And and actually, I was a musician for a very long time, performing a lot as in throughout my whole 20s. And but painting was something I was really intimidated by. I'm the daughter of two creatives, one that's a writer and storyteller, and the other who's a fine oil painter and kind of a Renaissance artist. He can do anything. My father's like one of these guys that just is super creative at everything. And so it was a little intimidating to even, try to think that I could paint, you know. It took 40 years to undo all of that.
well, but you had apparently the genes for it, and you
Yeah,
also
maybe.
absorbed it by osmosis despite the intimidation. And I'm not playing armchair psychologist here, but you had a feeling that you had the exposure, and then you just
Yeah.
and then
And
you just started painting.
I just started painting because, when you do have an artist parent, it's like you're going to museums a lot, you're going to galleries all the time. So I was just super exposed to art. And I think just through that kind of art history throughout my life, it's like watching, 5,000 movies. You kind of get the idea of how to make a movie by watching a lot of movies. So
Right. Well,
I
I,
think that
I
was
watched a lot of movies and I thought I could be Gregory Peck, but that didn't work out very well for me. So let me introduce my guest, Jamie Byrd, who is she's a Renaissance woman, or just say Renaissance, whatever, without reference to gender these days. But in any event, your art has been exhibited in Asheville, and I assume other places. You're affiliated with a studio called Trackside Studio in Asheville. We just covered your filmmaking or film involvement, and you've managed, and I'm delaying what we really want to get into here, is the merger of the film aspect with your painting. So I'm going to leave it to you. You can either explain to the listeners what cold wax is
what cool.
and how it differs from other forms of painting, or we can jump into the adjusted or altered state of mind.
Our altered reality.
Right, augmented reality. You want to start with how
Well,
you paint?
let me start with the medium I work in. I used to work in acrylic, and then I also worked in just oil. Um, Acrylic was drying too fast for me, and oil was drying too slow. And I just it drove me crazy. So I tried to play with a lot of different mediums that I can add to both of those types of paints. And I finally came across cold wax. It hasn't been around that long, but I finally came across that a few years ago, and that seemed to be the Goldilocks spot for me. So I was able to add this medium to my oil paint, and it accelerates the drying time, but it also changes the way the paint works a little bit. So um, it you can use it more in a layering kind of way and build more texture, build more um, depth, and definitely remove paint so you can reveal the light and different colors underneath. So it's a different technique, and I found that it was a lot of fun. It was just very different from just painting, and I was able to use pottery tools, things that I had used when I used to do pottery. Um, and I just found it to be much more three-dimensional almost. Um, and I love the fact that it dries relatively quick. It still takes a long time to dry, but it's, not compared to straight oil. And that way I'm able to keep adding layers and layers and working on it a little more rapidly than I used to be able to. But I'm also, the acrylic was too fast and I was always in a hurry. So this was a perfect kind of medium for me. It When you mix it with the oil, it looks a little like frosting, cake frosting. So that's the other thing. It feels really nice to play with and move around. But you're still getting that great pigment from oil paints. And so the colors are still super vibrant, super nice. So that's how I ended up doing that. I
And
took
cold wax comes from beeswax. Is that a correct
it's
statement?
usually made with beeswax and mineral spirits and another kind of resin. I should be much better at explaining that, but I mean, I did get the Bible on it. I bought the big book on it. But yeah, those so it kind of firms up a little bit, and so it's different from encaustics because you're not heating anything. That's why it's called cold wax. It's in my opinion, and from what I understand, it's less toxic than encaustics. So that was a little concern for me. I really didn't like heating up um, that stuff in a studio. And so, but you can use it very similarly. So sometimes paintings can look similar, but they're not. Encaustics is a little more shiny too, I think, and the cold wax creates more of a matte finish.
So it, in some ways, when I look at it, it seems like it has an element of finger painting associated with it, and
I use my fingers.
okay, all right, well, so I guessed. So very tactile, it sounds like, and as you say, it's not a flat surface. So when you look at
Right.
it, you can see, as you say, layers. Now, is when the technique for painting, is it layers? You start with, certain colors or certain images, and then you build on top of that, and the ones that are beneath are somewhat still visible. How does that work?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, in this, I think the benefit the benefit of using um, oil and cold wax together too is that you can use it almost like a glazing. So you can do a lot of transparent layers. So I start usually all my paintings, I start with a lot of mark making for two reasons. One, to have fun. So, and the second reason is to get something on the blank canvas so that it's not that intimidating. But it's actually the funnest part for me. I'm just using lots of pencils or charcoal or other kind of crayons and things and markers. And I'm usually writing stuff on there. So a lot of my paintings underneath, even though you would never know that, have a lot of interesting things underneath. But what happens is as you start building the layers, you may see some of that marks, um, getting recovered or might be showing through, and it just creates kind of more depth and more mystery into the painting. So
But the writing may not be discernible once you're finished with the painting.
correct.
It's like,
Correct.
okay, it's like an ancient crypt, essentially.
Exactly, exactly.
Okay,
And you might have a piece that has a piece of poetry in there or something. So,
okay, okay. I should have said it's more like the Dead Sea Scrolls, but let's not talk about that. So, okay, so you started painting. You came across this medium that worked well for your creativity and what you wanted to express. And not trying to get too far ahead, at some point, there was this augmented reality experience. You went to a Star Trek show, or you saw some fantasy movie, or what is that? What is all that about?
as I mentioned earlier, I had seen another artist online using it, and it was more digital art. So I hadn't seen someone with like a painting do it before. So I was very intrigued by that, and I was also in the middle of learning animation. So I was kind of I thought, oh, right, I want to see what this is. This is pretty fascinating because what if I can put this with my paintings or do something where it can collaborate with my paintings? And um, so I looked more into it and just did a lot of research and realized, okay, well, I already know how to do these special effects things, and I'm learning how to animate. And I've already have a lot of experience in sound design and sound building. What if I just, put this together and I can use the technology now, allowing the augmented reality to work? So really what I'm doing is I'm using an online app that hosts, that's a hard word to say, that hosts my creations, and they are the ones that allow you and everybody else to view my work through a phone or a tablet.
So you have some sort of licensing arrangement with them, as it
I
fair to
pay
say?
them I pay them to be my host. Yeah. They're not a creative site. They don't
They're
do
a
anything.
platform.
Exactly. They're a platform. And and I know that there's a couple more out there that are doing that. And we'll probably see more as this catches on. So as soon as I discovered that that existed, it was absolutely something I wanted to do. I dove into it a little deeper than I was expecting. I was thinking, oh, I'll just do it for a couple of paintings and that'll be fun and people will think it's really cool. And then suddenly, between the Grand Bohemian and Trackside, the two galleries that I'm in here in Asheville, they both were really excited and they wanted to do a show. And I kind of wasn't exactly super prepared for that. But I said, sure, let's do it. And I dive into it. And so then I spent 2 very intense months creating a lot of augmented reality and painting as much as I could. But I ended up taking paintings I had already painted like through the year and put augmented reality to them. So that was a relief that I was able to actually, I had some paintings, and because otherwise I don't think I could have painted that much in that short period of time.
So let me understand. First of all, do you feel as if combining artwork, traditional artwork, I say traditional, although you're using this medium, which is not what everybody else uses. It has certain creative properties associated with it. But do you feel like the augmented reality is where you're going to stay for a while, which is to say um, things, the new paintings that you do are going to
Great
have this
question. Yeah,
technology embedded?
it's a great question. I don't know that. I feel
Because
as
you're an
a
artist.
yeah, and I'll always be kind of a traditional artist in that way. Painting on a support, the real life world is totally what I will always do. I always knew that I would eventually move into this part of my career as an artist, as a painter, as I got older, because I really want my hands, you know, on something. It was either going to be that or pottery. So it was just, I think though, I want to answer this because the way I feel about this is I know that there's probably people that have problems with it. Um, and But as I watch my niece and nephew and other young people around me growing up, where they're just so involved in their technology, in their phone or their tablets or their laptops, and you can't fight this system. I'm never going to be able to fight this evolution of what's happening. So in my mind, I feel like I'm going to be able to expose people to art that maybe not that hadn't had that opportunity, because they're going to be so involved in digital art and digital sensory overload that this could allow people to see more art, but still feel interactive and immersive in technology in a way. So as I'm watching children come in to the galleries to experience this show, it's been fascinating seeing how they respond, and they want to talk more about the painting and not about the technology.
Hmm.
And that's very exciting to me. So I think that's a good thing.
Well, that's curious. It's almost unexpected, I would think.
Yeah.
But let me pick up on that a little bit. So I know that we can't show the augmented reality feature for people that are
On the
watching,
video.
going to watch this on Facebook. Um,
Mhm.
but maybe you can show a couple examples of paintings that have the augmented reality feature, and then you can tell us what's going on. But I want to stay with the issue you just raised, which is in the painting that I purchased, and also in all the other paintings that I looked at using the feature with my trusty cell phone, iPhone, whatever you call it, showing my age again. Um, what I see in the augmented reality part is sort of a fanciful uh, overlay. And at first I look at it and I say, what, like in the picture I have, there's a land, it's sort of a landscape, but there's some buildings in the background. It's a big field. And then when I switch on to the augmented reality feature, there are vehicles, trucks and cars going across. And, you know, my first instinct was that's really cool, but what does that mean? What is the message that's being conveyed by that? So getting back to where I heard you say a moment ago that some people may have problems with this. I'm guessing, I'm not going to ask you to explain what that means, but I'm guessing you're saying some purists, I guess that's the right term, will say, well, wait a second, you know, make up your mind. You're
Right.
either you're either doing video or you're doing a painting. You can't do both.
Right.
But 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 again, on the idea that you can't change City Hall or evolution, and people are already stuck on cell phones, videos, all those kinds of platforms, that ain't going away. You found a way to combine it, but did you find a way to combine it at this point in terms of the thematic aspects of the augmented reality with the raw painting, for want of a better phrase, itself? And if you don't understand my question, I'll try to reformulate it.
I sort of understand your question.
That's good. That's
Um,
close enough.
yeah, I don't know. I just find that I'm one of these people that are on the cusp of knowing what it's like to not have technology and then having most of my life, like half of my life with technology. So there's, I think people my age, if you embraced technology like I did in the 80s, um, then you probably, you can see that merging these makes sense, especially as we push further into technology. But I'm also from the school of where, we had a rotary telephone when I was a kid. So, taking watercolors and painting on paper was the only option you had. I am a traditionalist really at heart. So, but I think I'm reiterating what I already said, but I feel like it's been like watching people today that have this full immersion. So in other words, people 20 years and younger, they are completely involved in the whole aspect. I've had so many young people come in, and I mean like young men and women in their teens and their early 20s, just wanting to talk about art, and that they're fascinated with this idea, but they came in because of the whole augmented thing. But now it's like, oh, I want to take some workshops to learn how to paint. And so I think that's great. However you can reach people,
Well, get them in the door is the concept. How do you
getting
get
them in the
in the
door,
door?
getting a butt in the seat, you know what I mean? So
Well, you mentioned rotary phones. I want to pick up on something you said a moment ago.
don't date me more than that, okay?
I'm not dating you.
It's okay.
Silent films. I I started watching Chaplin and other silent
I
films
love it.
as a young kid,
Yeah.
and obviously it was only available for the most part in fine art independent movie
Right.
one screen, and that whole business is
Yeah,
probably
because we didn't have
survived.
computers in
We didn't
the
have computers, but I fell in love with silent film. I know from having studied a little bit that obviously when quote talkies came out, there was a huge uproar and outrage from the people who were employed in the movie business as well as
That's
others.
right.
What is this talking business? That changes the whole mode. And people who were used to doing acting in silent film, first of all, they had to have a non-squeaky voice if they were going to continue, but they had to change the way they presented themselves.
Yeah.
But where I'm getting to is even today, I'm struck by how many young people have never heard of Charlie Chaplin, and don't.
So sad.
So sad they don't know silent films. But people who are in the arts, in any respect, do know what silent films are, and
Yeah.
you can still watch a silent film today with all the technology, with 3D and all the rest of that stuff, and still say, yeah, I see that. I see how it's transitioned
I
into
I
today.
truly believe that they like those films taught me about storytelling. And because they were such a concise way of telling a story with very little dialogue, and it made me realize that it doesn't have to be this big thing to tell a story. It can be about a cup of tea, so it really it I think it's amazing. I think I would recommend people to anyone that talks to me about how do I start, being a filmmaker. I say start with silent movies. Just watch as much as you can. Make a silent movie. Make a film where there's no dialogue, and if you can get your story across that way, then you're a good storyteller.
So
So
seeing the whole span of art, I think, is what has probably encouraged you to incorporate this. I mean, they still perform Greek plays and Shakespeare today,
right, right,
and use and many of the Shakespearean plays still use Elizabethan language to get the
yeah,
point across. Again, what is new is old, and what is old is new. And I'm sure there's somebody who said that a lot better than me, but obviously, obviously there you've been able to figure out a way to blend it, and you're not, apparently it doesn't sound like you're questioning it so much. You're just saying it's there, it's
yeah,
available, kids like it, adults who like to be kids like it,
yeah.
everybody's going to like it.
Yeah, I think, I mean, I haven't met anybody that has snubbed me about it. Um, there was one person who said, "I'm just trying to spend less time on my screen." And I said, "I so get that because I am exactly the same way. But that's why my paintings still are my paintings. And they're not always about looking at them through a device, you know. So that's important to me, is to make sure the painting stands on its own as a piece of art that you're still going to want in your home or look at, because it's important to me when I buy a piece of art that I truly am enjoying it, and that it brings me some kind of joy. If it's something I'm going to look at every day, absolutely. Um, so I think the whole idea of having the augmented reality was, like I said, originally it was just like this fun idea, and I thought I was going to do it to like 3 paintings, you know. And and then it just turned into a little more than that. And so I still like doing it, and I've always said, as long as I'm enjoying it, I'll continue. But the minute I'm not enjoying it anymore, that's probably when it's going to stop. So,
Well, right before that minute, it will be the minute you start thinking about it too much.
right,
And then your creative juices will probably turn off at that point,
exactly,
and you'll
exactly.
and you'll figure out a way to incorporate pottery into your
I'll look,
painting.
yeah, I'll look
I,
for something new. Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I'm one of those, I'm very much inspired by my father, where it's like, yeah, I'm just kind of done doing that right now. And now I'd like to do this. And, you know, and I think it's because I enjoy learning, more than I do just doing. So as soon as I feel like I've learned as much as I can, um, then will go to something else that I can learn. But I've taken some, I was just talking to a young man yesterday, and, I told him, I said, I still take workshops. I do workshops. I go to retreats. I read a lot of books. I look at masters. I'm always learning, and you never stop learning. And the minute you do that, then, I don't know, you might want to try something else. But
okay.
for me, it's all about just continually bringing something new to the table.
Bringing
So,
something new and fresh. So let me ask you again, within the parameters of this
so
is
who knows how long the AR will go.
forever. So you're in a studio, we're doing radio. There's also people watching this on Facebook. Do you have anything behind you, in front of you, or to the left of you that you can just hold up and say, this has an augmented reality
No,
feature? Oh,
no,
you
because
don't have that.
everything is in the
The galleries.
galleries. I literally don't have, I hardly have, these are just works in progress. So the stuff I have back here, this is something that's not even close to being finished yet, but
Okay.
but
Looks finished to me.
yeah, it's got a lot of base layers still, and I'll probably put a few more layers on it and bring out some more light on it. And it will eventually have a little augmented reality. I doubt it'll be anything really extravagant. Because I mean, there's some pieces that I don't know if you like, your piece is extravagant. That one I did a lot of work on that one. And I think did you see the one with the 3 buildings that had the
Yes.
spaceship and the rocket?
Yes.
And that was a really intense piece. We sold that yesterday, by the way.
Okay.
But uh, they they some of them take a lot longer than others. But right now, I currently I haven't really had the time to sit at the computer and create more of this work, because it is more time consuming than I was expecting. And I've said, I don't know if I mentioned this to you or not, but um, it is like 2 separate pieces of artwork. So, I do the painting, and that can take a really long time. And then the AR is a complete other art project. Um, and that's how I see them. I see them as 2 complete different art projects. I might as well be throwing a pot that goes with the painting, um, so it
What,
takes a certain number of hours and concentration, and I'm always learning something new because I get bored. I don't want to do the same one. So let me see, how do I create this? and now I'm learning 3D modeling. And uh, so as long as I can learn something new, which it seems like there's a lot I can learn, because I'm just touching the tip of the iceberg with what this technology can do, um, then I'll keep doing it. I think we'll see more and more of this, as people decide that they like to do both things. And I know there's more museums and more exhibitions that are happening, but they usually have a lot of people helping build this stuff, like the Van Gogh immersion experience, as well as I know they have an augmented reality Salvador Dali exhibit. But it's obviously Salvador didn't do the animation, but they had a whole team of people doing this work. So, I mean, yeah, I think we'll see more and more of it. It's just going to take a little while, and I'll do it, like I said, as long as I'm still enjoying it. And so we'll
Feeling
see.
creative. Um, Again, for anybody just tuning in, we're speaking with Jaime Byrd, who is an artist who has done a lot of paintings over the years, but she's added augmented reality, which we're talking about as another feature of her paintings, which brings a question to my mind is, when you're working on a painting, have you already thought out what kind of augmented reality you're going to add to it, or does that come pretty much after you're done?
Yeah, it definitely comes after I'm done. I don't think about that at all. I really do keep them two very separate experiences. Sometimes, and that's funny that you bring that up, because I had a painting that was called Still Waters, I think. And then the augmented reality was all about the water moving. And I just thought, well, now that contradicts the title.
Or
But
not?
or not. Maybe, yeah, maybe I'm just being sarcastic.
Joke's on you. You thought this was only still. Got it.
But yeah, I don't think about it that way, because I'm still really immersed in the painting experience, and I like freeing my mind of everything while I'm painting. So as much as I may have a plan, it's still very intuitive for me. So I just kind of,
Go with the flow.
I go with the flow. And this particular show, the theme, is it's really about calmness and tranquility and peacefulness, and that had a lot to do with what I needed during the pandemic. So these paintings are about, like, what I did to kind of get through this last year, and I needed to just kind of stay calm and stay peaceful. So the point was to immerse myself in the paintings with that kind of emotion as well. So, but sometimes, like in your painting, a little bit of chaos comes out as well. So,
Interesting. Well, for those of us who may be less technologically astute, shall we say, I'm tracing my words carefully. I mean, I know these days during COVID, at the height of the COVID, you go to a restaurant and they don't give you a menu anymore. They tell you to use your
use
phone
your
and
phone.
scan
Use that
something.
QR code. Just scan
Exactly.
that.
So I'm guessing that the technology behind this is somewhat similar, but I'm going to ask you now, when you're done with the painting and you're ready to add the augmented reality feature, which is video, music, whatever, do you have to embed something into the painting to make that happen? And is that, what kind of
Well,
laborious process is that?
I'm not necessarily embedding, but the app that I use does. So what I do is I start as though I'm making a movie project. And I look at it that way. I look at it as, I want to tell a short story. And what, I already know what my painting kind of is trying to evoke. And so I'd like to bring that out, or dive deeper into that storyline of what the painting might, if the painting was talking to you, what it might say. So I will start with a digital image of my painting. I'll take a photo and then I manipulate the photo. So I'm taking it into special effects program and manipulating it that way. And then I'm adding layers of animation, just kind of like I do the layers of the paint. And then I do the same thing with sound design. And I'm just adding layers and layers of sound design. And then with the augmented reality app that I'm using, I just tell them what I upload what I created, and then they basically have a way to scan the painting so that when you hold your phone up, it reads my painting like a QR code.
Okay.
So it just really has to be high contrast and it literally, I guess they use some kind of AI that decides, and I don't know really how their technology works, but this is how I understand it. And so then that way your phone identifies my painting as the unique painting that it is. Um, and then will play what I have asked the app to play.
So you produce the animation, so to speak, and the people that own the technology figure out how to program that, so to speak, into the painting. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, kind of. I mean, it's like just taking a link somewhere, and clicking on a link and getting to a website.
Okay. Maybe you could
Or
describe.
it's like the menu that you just described at a restaurant. You take
Right,
your phone and you
right,
scan their QR code and you get their menu. It's exactly the same sort of thing.
right, but without pictures, and it just says braised Brussels sprouts. Um, but let me just ask you something about, again, sort of the painting aspect of it, excuse me, or the augmented reality aspect of it. You had a painting on display that I believe pictured a, a wine bottle or a bottle of some sort of spirits and a goblet. Can you tell the folks listening to this what that was? Because that was a terrific animation.
Well, basically, that's funny that you say that because the animation is so old school. It was like my first real attempt at this whole, truly animating something. And I really feel like the majority of that painting is the sound. Because I build the whole story with the sound. I'm building opening the bottle, the cork, the pouring of the glass, the people laughing, cheering,
The
and
fizzing.
the music in the background.
Right.
But truly, the painting itself hardly does anything. But yes, the cork pops out. You see some cool little magical stuff coming out of the bottle and out of the cup. And yeah, it's in the painting's called Happy Juice. And it's basically whatever you want it to be. But to me, it was about getting back out into the world because I had been, pretty reclusive up here for over a year. And I was fantasizing about, oh, I wish I was going to Italy or something and just sitting and having a bottle of wine or a nice cup of coffee outside or with friends. And so,
So the animation in the picture that we ended up buying had it was a little more complex than that,
yeah.
which is you had a landscape of sorts. I mean, I
And
say
any
landscape,
cars.
right,
Yeah.
but maybe that's not accurate because you combine landscape, a broad expanse of a field, with buildings in that particular painting, and you do that sort of same thing. So you can just tell us a little bit about what you like to paint besides um, goblets and wine bottles. Um, and then you had cars running across, which I mentioned earlier. But you also had some side scenes going on. There were,
There was a
yeah,
dog getting up and looking around. There were, I think, kids playing too in that,
yes,
playing with an airplane. And
right.
um, yeah, I mean, to me, a lot of these are all scenes from me walking the Camino de Santiago in France, and or my fantasy with my obsession with Portugal. Um, like there's another one there that's riverfront that's still at the gallery that has the little boat that goes by,
Yes.
is totally inspired by Porto and the river going through Porto in Portugal. Um, but a lot of the little houses have just all been part of my time in Europe and in Mexico, where I spend a lot of time in little towns, and there seems like there's always like these cute little towns that are colorful and whimsical little houses, um and so I've I've been incorporating that into my work for a while now, for sure.
Do you do any sort of portrait painting?
Nope.
Don't do that. Okay. All right.
No, that's my dad. He does that and he does an incredible job. Yeah. So
Okay. So we got that intimidation feature
yes.
going on. You're not going to paint the portrait, at
No,
least not now until the
I
spirit moves
I
you.
do so poorly at any representational stuff other than my houses and trees.
Okay. You had
Yeah.
another painting that had, I think, in the animation, a rocket ship. I'm not sure.
Yeah, that's the one with the 3 buildings. It was called
Okay.
Community, and that had the pink Cadillac, and, it had a rocket, and then it had a spaceship that came in, and the spaceship was 3D. It comes at you and then dives off the side. So that was kind of a fun, 3D project for me.
Well, I know better than to try to get you to predict your future as well as potentially the future of this augmented reality. But something occurred to me. It hasn't been that long. It wasn't that long ago that galleries introduced um, the idea of not only just walking around the gallery with a docent somewhere else, but putting on, headphones and listening
Right.
and having somebody describe what's going on. Could you visualize in your own case, or perhaps other artists, using that feature again to increase and improve or augment the experience, so that you click onto one of your pictures or somebody else's picture and you have the artist?
Yes,
Or-
absolutely. I think, well, I talked to a few tech people this last few weeks that have come in and have said they work, from Austin or from California. And they one of them was part of a development company and he showed me photos of it, that is a AR headset. It's very slick, very small. It's more like sunglasses. Way better improvement from Google Glass, or that poor attempt. But I think that eventually, yeah, that I think we're moving towards that, and where that, yes, I think people are going to be spending a lot more time in augmented reality. I mean, we're using it already in education. We use it for training medical surgeries. I mean, the list is pretty intense with how much we use augmented reality, and in retail. I mean, now you can put a shoe on your foot through your phone and change the colors, and see which one you like better,
or
so.
you can buy spectacles online, and they'll take a picture of
And
your face and you,
you can change them as you just click. I don't like that one, I
right.
like this one. So, I mean, it's going to get much more sophisticated, obviously. Whether it's good or bad, I don't know. But I definitely see that we're gonna be using more of it, and we're gonna see more people using devices to experience these kind of things. I did want to mention one other thing that I found very cool about some people using AR in art and design, is there are some places in the world, if you go to a particular part in a city, and if you point your phone or tablet to the skyline, there'll be a piece of art there that you can't see otherwise. So there's people doing some kind of AR graffiti, if you will, in some ways all over the world.
That'd be good if they did that more than actually throwing the paint on the walls, but I get what you're saying. get what you're saying.
Well, I think it's very interesting, and I think that we may see more things like that, and you know, I don't, I hope we don't get to the Blade Runner days while I'm still alive, but who knows? I don't know.
And what's that a reference to, having only
Well,
seen?
just that there's, it looks like there's always like um
Some,
holographs and things
right,
constantly around you,
right, right,
trying to sell you crap. So
right. Reality disappears and virtual completely takes over. But
exactly.
that's a good point, and we just have a few minutes left. But I wanted to touch on it, which is, when during COVID, obviously people have visited art galleries online, presumably with as COVID starts to wane, crossing our fingers, people will start coming back to the museums and the art galleries themselves, because there's only so much of an experience you can get by looking at it online.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think what you're saying is, you would like to see this augmented reality be an accessory to actually
Getting
looking at.
people getting people in the galleries, getting people back in a museum, people seeing art in a new way. That's all. I don't think it's necessary, but I think it may bring in people that normally have need, wouldn't be interested, or maybe need a little freshening up of like having their art experience. So I think it's a nice additional thing, but it's certainly not necessary. And just getting people out in the galleries and the museums again is a great thing, and I hope that we can continue to do that. Now, we didn't talk about NFTs, which I did want to
Yes,
mention
go ahead.
without getting into non-fungible tokens deeply, but all of my augmented reality pieces, if you will, I guess, if you want to call them a video or whatever you want to call it, they are available as NFTs, as non-fungible tokens. And if people are interested in that, they just have to let me know, and I can send them to my marketplace for that.
Okay, well, with that, tell people how they can get to know more of your stuff, what websites you
Sure.
want to direct them to.
Okay, the show is still running at Trackside Studios at 375 Depot in the River Arts District of Asheville, North Carolina. You can also look at my work as well as the augmented reality on my website. And that is jaimebyrd.com. And Jaime is JAIMEBYRD.com. If you spell it the other way, you'll get another website.
From another person that
It's
has
a
nothing to do
singer
with you.
songwriter, right? And
Yeah.
so, so you'll know you're at the right place if you see art and augmented reality. And you can follow me on Instagram. I try to put up new paintings and sometimes video demos and other things of how I'm creating the work at my Instagram page, which is also instagram.com/JaimeByrd. And yeah, and if you want to see the augmented reality, you can literally use the app, which is Artivive. That's Artivive. And when you download that app on your phone, if you're on a laptop and you're looking at one of my photos, or one of my paintings, you can literally point your phone to the painting on the screen, and it should play the augmented reality.
All right. Well, unfortunately, we've run out of time. My guest has been Jaime Byrd, an artist extraordinaire with
Thank you,
augmented
Mark.
reality. And thanks for coming. And we'll have to get you back on the show to cover the other side of the stories.
No problem. I appreciate you having me.
Thank you.
Thanks.